All right, good morning, everybody. Thank you all for coming today to session one of our LaBella project management training. This is a 6-session series. Each session is 2 hours. We have a number of excellent presenters, and the intent of this training is to provide you with information on the LaBella way of doing project management. It is a mix of both general project management principles as well as very specific methodologies and processes that we use here at LaBella. So because this is a series, we ask that everyone is committed to attending all 6 of the sessions. There are some sessions that will have some homework that we'll be talking about. And during the course of the training, because we want this to be interactive and for you to get as much out of it as possible, we require that people have their cameras on. So if you currently don't have your cameras on, please put them on so that we can see your smiling faces on this Monday morning and know that you're there and you're present and engaged, because there's a lot of information that is gone over during the sessions, and there's just a lot to absorb. So we appreciate your doing so. So our first presenter today is, we've got 2 presenters, Mike Winderall, who's our COO and is a very experienced project manager with the company. He's going to provide an overview of our program. And then following that, Beth Curran, who is our head of our marketing group, is going to give us a little bit of discussion on some marketing principles and how clients buy. And I think you'll find both presenters to have a lot of good information. So without ado, I'm going to turn this over to Mike to give the introduction to the program. So.
Great. Thanks, Catherine. Good morning, everybody. Just for informational purposes, you might see me in the window as Sue Matzat. I am not Sue Matzat. I had a computer issue, so just bear with me for this hour and we'll get it straightened out down the line. But thanks for taking the time to attend these LaBella project management sessions. I see so many names on the attendee list that I haven't met yet. By way of introduction, I'm Mike Winderall. I'm the Chief Operating Officer here at LaBella, and I've been privileged to kick off this PM training session several times now, probably up 6 or 7 sessions. So we hope you'll find it informative today. This is just an introductory session that I'll give. We'll talk through project management in more of a general in nature, with a focus on PM responsibilities and those types of things, and also talk about what the program will be down the line, and the things that you'll be exposed to and prepared to learn. So our agenda is I'll talk for 45-50 minutes. We'll take a short break, and then Beth is going to come and give a session on how clients buy. And I'm sure you'll find that interesting and informative as well. So let's start. What is project management? This course is really geared towards what is LaBella's PM program. There's many project management programs out there. We have, through the efforts of many skilled people with different levels of project management responsibility, built internally a program focused specifically on LaBella's approach. Again, there's many different project management training sessions that you've probably been exposed to at one time or another out there, but this is really geared towards LaBella employees by LaBella PMs who have been here for a period of time working on projects and are familiar with the way we do our project management. So what is a PM? What does it take? Is it for you? We'll talk a little bit today about PM skill sets, credentials, expectations, dropping back a little bit, a little bit of philosophy here. We've asked a lot of people to become PMs in LaBella. There's many new up and comers. I realize we have a cross section of talent and ability here as it relates to the project management, some much further experience than others. So, bear with us through the program, and hopefully there's something valuable for everybody to learn. But getting back to it, we've asked many people with our growth in the company to step up and run projects, and we want to allow some training and some backdrop here to just inform you and teach you in these sessions about the LaBella way of of doing project management. Please feel free to ask questions as we go along. We always talk about the inability to do this in a personal setting where we're all looking at each other. Not able to do that yet. We still continue to teach by teams, but please raise your hand or interject anytime you have a question or want us to answer something that you might be wondering about. So with that, we can go to the next slide, Heather. So before we progress, I wanted to start with a short plug here for LaBella's core values. Hopefully you've all seen at some point in your tenure here with LaBella, you've seen this slide. For purposes of this presentation, I just want to talk quickly about the first two. As a project manager, and again, for those that are experienced, you can relate to it. You'll find yourself in many difficult, challenging situations. In line with our core values, we ask that as a project manager and as a staff member in general, but particularly as it relates to project management today, we ask that you always exhibit honesty and integrity. Your clients will be reading you. They will be looking at you as a PM. You always feel the best approach to any project. And I'm sure that, it's instilled in many of your common beliefs, but to always exhibit honesty and integrity. In the end, if you're not doing that, it will backfire on you. That's my personal experience. You're developing a relationship with both your design team, your core team, and with your client. You want to be honest and have integrity throughout the process. The second, stewardship of resources. You're managing both the clients and LaBella's resources as a PM. Part of this is understanding the client's program, what the budget is, what they're committed to spend, kind of understanding their take and their mission, and managing those resources appropriately. And then at the same time, you're also managing LaBella's internal resources. We have a fee commitment, we have a schedule, we have budget constraints around our project. So you as a PM, you're responsible there for stewardship of resources, and carrying out the project in that manner. So just wanted to reflect on a couple of our core values and how they relate to project management. So next slide, Heather. So this is here just a summary of project management, the practice of initiating, planning, executing, controlling, and closing out projects. It's the work of the team to achieve specific goals and meet specific success criteria at the specified time. So involved in that is several process groups. You'll see there, initiating a project is generally a one-time event that involves your contracts, your kickoff meetings, all the things that go into that. And again, we'll talk a little bit about kickoff meetings down the line and making those scalable. But when you move it from initiation, you go into the planning, monitoring, controlling, and executing phases of a project, which is a cycle that continually repeats itself. As you enter different phases of a project and approach the different aspects as you progress down the line of a project life, you're going to continue to revolve in that circle of planning, executing, monitoring, controlling, and then you go to the one-time event of closing out a project. So PM training sessions 3 through 6 of this program are really built around these process groups. So again, today we're kind of setting the stage of project management, and you'll go through your courses after today that really have a more deeper dive in these pieces of the process groups. So with that, Heather, we can move on. So I guess, do we have any hands up or any questions so far that anybody might have on project management or expectations of the course or anything we've said so far? I want to make sure I can only see a handful of you. So if anybody has a question, Heather, can you please let me know? And if not,
Yes, I'll let you know.
Nothing at this point, so we'll continue to move on. So good project management equals good risk management. Managing risk is one of the biggest components of being a PM. It's not just managing your resources, it's managing risk for both the client and LaBella. Risk is real in all of these outline boxes you see here. Particularly with the way that contracts are being written now and the way that, claims are processed on projects. Managing your risk is very important in your documentation, your communications, both with your internal team and with the client in particular. Your proposal and contract, that's the base agreement that you have with the client that you need to understand fully and distribute out to your team. What is in that proposal contract and what is in the contract with the owner on scope, schedule, fee, and what the expectations are. There's a big piece on quality control and quality management. We have through our GPS group, which is guiding project success. On the operations page, we have tools and guides to help you through QA, QC type issues. And managing risk is also very important in your client relationship. Developing a relationship with that client is very important. You're going to hear Beth talk about how clients buy. One of our big pushes in LaBella, as with any consulting firm, is you want an experience with that client that helps you develop a relationship of repeat business, which is managed through risk and developing the right project for them that will help you sustain that relationship. And it goes back to honesty and integrity. Honesty and integrity with that client will help set the foundation for repeat business based on your performance. Team experience can be a risk in a project. As a PM, implementing and carrying out the process of a project with your team, make sure you have the right team in place that has the right experience and the right technical knowledge to advance the project. Then we've added this piece with notes on plans, which is historically an area that is much debated and much discussed. But between your project specifications, notes on plans, make sure as a PM, you deliver the right message to your team, how you want that to go in a project. Because duplicate notes that conflict with specifications or vice versa is really a problem that can lead to substantial risk. So we just wanted to emphasize a few areas here where risk comes into play and is very important. And I can't stress enough the documentation piece as well. As a PM, documenting your project so that there are issues down the line, you have the right pieces in place that you can refer to, for milestones in your project and agreements with the owner on scope, schedule, fee, that type of thing. Make sure you have good documentation and are communicating that well to the team. So next slide, Heather. So just a little bit dropping back to the LaBella PM program. When did we start this? This started way back in October of 2019. We have had consultants come in, give us training sessions on how to do project management, and found really that a lot of the way that we initiate and do projects, there was a lot of variation in how these prototype PM sessions are run to train project managers. So we developed, again, a program specifically around how we do it here at LaBella, dating right back to, contracts, PIFs, how to read and work in Deltec, all the things that are critical to how we do it here at LaBella. Why? Because we think it's more efficient. It helps you be more effective and leads to more profitable projects, reducing all the risks we talked about, resulting in more satisfied clients and staffs. We've done this across all the divisions. Looking across some of the names, it looks like we have people today in both the accounting division, waste and recycling division, architectural division. So we have a good cross section of people today in the training program. We've done several sessions trying to reach out to people at at the appropriate level who feel that they could benefit from training. Again, doing it the LaBella way. This is a part here with who I always like to talk in the kickoff session that, project management is not for everybody. We'll talk a little bit more about that here in a bit, but you as an individual start carving out career path and where you want to go in your career with the firm. Managing projects is an appropriate step for many people once you get the right training and expertise under your belt at a technical level. But we like to emphasize that it's not for everyone. It is a critical job. You're the face of LaBella out there with our clients and with our internal teams. And as some people look at this, they draw the conclusion it's probably not for me. And there's other career paths that satisfy that on a technical path or in some other way where you can advance within LaBella. But just wanted to emphasize project management is not for everybody. And it certainly is something that you have to look at and consider the skill sets and the knowledge and the responsibility associated with it and make your own personal assessment. And how do we run this program? We provide the training, the reinforcement, and continuous improvement. Continuous improvement is what we're looking at today by providing you this, expanded program about how we do it at LaBella. It'll expose you to resources within the firm and people that you can ask questions to when appropriate and when you need, assistance along the way. So do we have any questions yet? Anybody want to add any commentary or personal experiences or anything before we move any further? Might get to a point where I have to call on people, but we're not there yet. So I guess with none of that, we'll keep moving. So LaBella's PM program and our process elements. We've already talked a little bit here, project opportunities and initiation, more on the marketing and business development end of it and how we initiate projects into the firm. Identifying opportunities with your division, with the other project managers, with clients that you've already worked with. What is the extent of involvement with other divisions and stakeholders? How do I get the right team in place that can provide the right technical knowledge? And then assessing, which is a big piece of it, a go, no-go process, which varies across the firm how we implement that. Different people use different measures. We haven't been able to truly standardize yet that, but with our with the 8 divisions and the way people run their divisions differently, each division generally has a review process of go, no go, where you really have to determine, our ability to win a project and measuring whether or not the effort is worth it. Then you move into defining your project and developing your proposal, which is very key interaction with the client. Understanding the scope, schedule, costs. Schedule is key. Everybody tends to want to push their projects on an advanced schedule. As a project manager, you really have to measure, is that realistic and can we obtain that schedule? And obviously nailing down the scope so that you can put an appropriate fee proposal to it is very challenging and really takes some experience. So for younger PMs, you're going to need some assistance there, but really nailing down the scope and what resources you're going to need, how to get that job done, and then writing a tight proposal. Sometimes you get into situations where, you don't want a lot of exclusions in a proposal, but sometimes they're necessary. That's one of the key things there is understanding your client and what your leverage is, what your relationship is there to be sure that, we're scoping it appropriately, and reviewing the schedule and putting an appropriate cost to it. We do have standard agreements, standard contracts on our intranet that we encourage people to use. So make sure you're familiar with those contracts. In most cases, we want a standard agreement used, but in many cases, your client will initiate the agreement and the contract, in which case you don't have that leverage. So, that's where when you're, putting together a contract, ask for help if you have questions, and make sure we get an appropriate contract in place. And the remaining 4 of these, there'll be upcoming classes and sessions. So we won't go too in depth on this, but again, initiating and planning a project is very important. Securing that contract. I like to stop here just to give a drop back. Many times when you're working through the contract phase of a project, you'll be asked by an owner to begin work, even though your contract isn't finalized. We take many different approaches to that here in LaBella. First and foremost, understanding who that client is. Do we have history with them? Do we understand the client? We know that we'll eventually get there. We have proceeded in many projects without a contract signed, but we prefer to have contracts signed and in place. And then you move on to the PIF phase to set up that project in accounting. Our PIF is constantly being revised by the operation team in accounting to make sure it works for our teams. So any comments on that is certainly welcome. I did want to drop back on the contract piece and also say many questions we get asked sometimes around purchase orders. Are purchase orders an acceptable form of contract? Generally, in most cases, if we're working under an MSA, obviously you have term assignments under an MSA, so a work order against that MSA is absolutely fine. And in many cases, we do accept purchase orders depending on who the client is and our relationship with them. And then when I say understanding the client to know your leverage or what your wiggle room is around that, in many cases, we scrutinize developer clients at a much higher level than we would state agencies or municipalities or entities of that type. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of guidance there. And looking at executing a project, I mean, these are really key responsibilities of a project manager. You're leading the team, you're assigning the tasks. The big piece there we'll talk about here in a second is conflict management, client management. We've talked about risk and how risk is inherent in everything we do. Build the record, which is really your communication piece and making sure you have the right documentation in place. The big piece that we've been advancing under Catherine's efforts recently is the safety piece. Many clients are very interested in our safety program, our safety record, and how that reflects on the firm. So be prepared to put a safety plan together and address any documentation you need to provide around safety. And Catherine is certainly a great resource for that. And then ensure QA, QC is performed and documented. For many PMs, we always talk about, there's a lot of talk about QA, QC up front in a project. But then in the rat race begins, the schedule is pushing, the team is running, and QA, QC tends to, go by the wayside in a project. My only words of advice there is make sure you do it at intervals within a project and don't wait for final completion to do QA, QC. Build it into your schedule at different milestones of the project to make sure that you have quality. And I emphasize more often than not, technical quality is where the vast majority of claims come from. You as a PM, you can't always provide that technical quality oversight. So that's where you have to build a team and identify a team that can provide the right technical oversight to be sure that your project is technically sound. The other piece of that is certainly in multidiscipline projects, your cross-discipline coordination, which is very critical, making sure that the right hand knows what the left hand is doing. As a PM, you have to be sure you're holding project meetings that require communication between different disciplines to make sure people are coordinated in providing the right project in the end. So monitoring, controlling projects, you as a PM, you're monitoring project progress against your plan. You're watching and monitoring your scope, schedule, budget. Managing change is very difficult because there's almost no project that doesn't change throughout the course. Understanding what changes are being asked, what direction your project is going, whether or not you're still within scope. Those are all key challenges that we put on project managers to resolve those issues. And, when you do get change in scope or those types of things come up in a project, you have to be able to assess the schedule, be able to talk with the owner and get your team back on track from the schedule, costing, and all the other aspects of project management. And then to close the project out in the improvement process, make sure you have all your documentation in the project files. A lot of work been put into file structures and how we file projects. And then, it always looks at, you want to do a project assessment when complete. We have measures in place that reach out to clients to get feedback, but an effective project manager should have no surprises from the client end. If you're maintaining the right communications and staying in touch with your client, you should have no surprises. The key there is make sure you keep continually having touch base times with your client. The number one thing we hear from our clients is, I haven't heard from my PM in a period of time here. You have to make sure you stay in continual communication with your client, as well as your team. And then, the lessons learned and process improvement. Sometimes this gets pushed aside because you move from project A to project B and you're continually moving, but it is very beneficial to stop at the end of a project, learn what lessons there are to learn there and what process improvements we can make in a project. So with that, Heather, we'll go on to the next one. So I like to put this slide in because this kind of relates back to where I'm referring to project management and is it for everybody? The slide we put together because, almost every project that you lead as a PM, you're going to hear at least one or two of these, if not more, on your project. You're going to hear this from, your team. You're going to hear it maybe from your client, and you're going to have this kind of thinking in your head. Team was incompetent and didn't care. Again, you as a project manager, you have to take the appropriate measures, build the relationships internally, get the right people in place, and make sure you are in constant communication. Keep the team engaged. We have, project managers, you have to be outgoing. You have to be taking risk with your team. You have to be pushing the envelope to make sure that your team remains engaged. You're the leader of that team, and I'd like to refer to that phrase, the speed of the leader determines the rate of the pack. If you're not moving and pushing and keeping things on the right track, your team will drift, and that's what you don't want to happen. I didn't have enough time comes up on almost every project. There's generally not too many projects that have a lot of slush time in them. That sometimes can be beneficial to you as a PM, to have a more of a tighter schedule that you can push, but you feel can be delivered, because too much time leads to people drifting, and you want to keep them focused. The project keeps changing. This is a very difficult piece of a project, knowing when to push for add services, when you have scope creep. And this comes back to relationship with your client, understanding when is the right time to basically call a timeout and say, this isn't really what we signed up for. There's many clients and that go into it, and entities that go into projects really maybe not thinking things through. And that results in many changes within your project along the way. And it goes back to your initial proposal, what you signed up to do, understanding that clearly, and really making sure that you're monitoring that the project stays on track. Again, I would just comment on scope changes and when to go for ad services. That really is an ultimate PM challenge. You got to know your client. You have to know that you've been doing a good job to date. You have to be responsive along the way and build integrity with that client to be able to ask for ad services. And again, with some agencies, it's a lot easier than with others, with certain client types. Very difficult in the developer world to go back and ask for ad services. Other clients, such as state agencies, it's much more realistic in being able to ask that. So understand your client and what is your leverage in asking for ad services, because it's critical. You can really get out of scope and while you're responsible for the financial performance of that project, you have to be able to not be afraid at the right point in time to say, hey, this isn't what we signed up for. We got to revisit this project and what our team is doing. Had a terrible contractor and the CM didn't help. Happens all the time, especially in with the bidding laws out there and the ability to select appropriate contractors. You lose a lot of leverage in that area. In a multidiscipline job, you can have several contractors that aren't preferred, but you have to work through the projects with them. And that's just the way it goes. And working with a CM, there's many times, we refer to CMs from our standpoint as paper pushers. You don't get a lot of leverage or support there because, they're in a role there where they really can kind of be hands off at many times and push a lot of that role to the project manager. But I would say, with that being said, you want to build relationships with your CM and your contractors to try to get the best project you can possibly get. Coming out with guns a-blazing usually backfires. You want to try these people through the process, understand what leverage you have, and continue to work with them to the point where you have to draw a line, because it's, in most cases, you're not going to get a contractor removed from a job. You're not going to get a CM removed from a job. They're there with you for the length and life of that project. Your best angle is to work relationships with them where you have some trust and some integrity and some ability to take the moves that you need to make, which kind of rolls into, the client is impossible. We have many of those. Fortunately, a lot of the movement in the firm lately with the ability to get, appreciable work, keep our people busy, we've been filtering out some of these clients that maybe we don't want to work for. Because there are many clients that, they are very difficult to work with. They have certain angles on a project. They have very little respect for the deliverables that you're delivering, and look at it as commodity or what have you. So there are many projects where our clients can be very difficult. That's why we like to find the good clients that we can build relationships with, that treat us with dignity, respect, value what we're doing, and get repeat business from those clients. Everyone kept charging to the job. It's very common if you don't stay in touch with your team and make sure they know the phase budgets, all the things that go into a project, and you can't let them drift. If there's a hold on a project or a project goes in, it starts moving in a different direction, you really need to put a hold on your resources at that time, or people will continue to work on it thinking they're doing the right thing. That's a communication piece, which is very critical. Make sure that you keep your your employees that are working on your job on target, moving in the right direction. Very challenging, but it's something that if you don't keep that moving in the right direction, you will not have financial success on your project. I didn't have enough help is also very common because, you know, people are stressed on multiple jobs. The legwork you do up front with that to make sure you got commitment, you got the right people, and make sure that you talk with their managers, make sure you've got the right people in there that are allocated with the time available to commit to that project is a never-ending challenge because the business changes daily. People get pulled in different directions. It's very demanding of a project manager to keep that team engaged and focused on what your ultimate objectives are on a project and make sure they remain committed. The budget was unrealistic. You're going to hear that from your team. It's going to come up and, you know, nobody ever has the budget that they would like to have. That doesn't happen in our business. Everybody would always like to have more. It's very often a back and forth discussion, you know, but you need to have that discussion and get some buy-in that we can do this job for this budget, and make sure that you get there. Not always possible when you have multiple disciplines working on a job, but the key there is trust and integrity. You know, things change in a project and being able to shift budget. You know, many people build reserves into their PIFs, you know, for unforeseen type things that come up with different divisions and different disciplines working on your job. Be fair with your team as those things come up and distribute as you you know, to the best you possibly can. In the end, it's a team effort. If the team comes out ahead, it's a good project for LaBella. So we got any questions? There's a lot of rambling there.
Mike, we do. Actually, we have a comment in the chat regarding the go, no-go process. So maybe you want to take a minute to touch on that and just, you know, touch on it real quick. And we have it addressed in the session, if I'm not mistaken.
You do have it addressed in future sessions. Is the question, what is our go, no-go process?
Briefly, and then they also want to make sure, or their question is, do we have a standard process to assess the viability of a potential project?
Kat, do you want to answer that or do you want me to take a stab at it? She disappeared.
Well, I think she might be having some computer technicalities.
Yeah,
Okay.
so you can either see me or hear me, but not both today. So
Okay.
So hopefully you can hear me. Is that thumbs up? Yes, you can hear me?
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
okay. Absolutely. We do have a process which we put into place last year, which Chris LaBella will be going through in a future session. Specifically, what we do is when you create an opportunity in Deltec, in our CRM section of Deltec, there is a page where you go through and essentially rate several aspects of the project, including, you know, what type of client it is, do we have the resources we need? And once you go through that rating process, that'll give you a score, and you use that score to make a judgment as to whether or not it's something we should be pursuing. LaBella is we are a firm, we do not go after every single project that's out there. Yes, we want to have work coming in the door. We want to be sure that we're going after good projects for good clients. We are not the lowest service provider, cost provider out there. That's not the way we operate. We provide good quality for the work that we produce, but in order to do that, we actually have this go, no go process. And Chris will go through that later on in the course, but I appreciate the question because it starts out right. Quality and good project management starts right there at the very beginning in determining whether or not we want to go after something or not.
Yeah, I would just add to that, Kat, you know, many divisions do this differently. Many divisions are, you know, the go, no go is sometimes more held tighter by the division director who makes those ultimate go, no go decisions. It depends on the project scale and size sometimes. What we do have evolving processes that are in place to more accurately assess go, no go. And, again, in multidiscipline projects, we may have projects where certain divisions will not be able to go. And that's where a PM has to look at subconsultants or something of that nature to fill out their team. Because again, if it's multidiscipline and you could have 5 divisions involved, someone may not be able to provide the staffing or the capabilities, at which time you have to understand that and get some direction on a subconsultant to write a good proposal. So the go, no go process is evolving. We're trying to get our arms around it in a more substantial way. And as we continue to grow, it gets to be even more and more challenging. So I would just add that to the go, no go discussion.
Thanks, Mike.
So Heather, I think we can move on. Project manager, again, it's a lot of repetition here to what I've already talked about. Responsible for providing project management for all aspects of assigned projects. I usually like to throw in here, with your team, and once you go through a few of the initial phases, an effective kickoff meeting is really critical in getting a project off on the right foot. And these are scalable. A kickoff meeting for a large multidiscipline project can be much different than a kickoff meeting for a single discipline project with a team that you might be familiar with. But in any event, we'd like to emphasize a kickoff meeting. Too many projects are initiated and resources are running on projects that really haven't had an effective kickoff meeting, because you drop back and you talk to team members and they said, well, we never really had one. I'm not really sure what my budget, scope, and fee is. And that really shouldn't happen. So as a PM, make sure you have an effective kickoff meeting where everybody understands their role, their assignment on the project, and again, what the scope, schedule, and budget are for that job to get buy-in at the kickoff meeting level. And then it's your job to make sure people stay engaged, you communicate with them, and address changes and all the things that we talked about as a project lives its life. So I think that's all I'm going to say, because I'm looking at my time constraint here, and I think we'll move right into the next slide. So we talked about, is project management appropriate for everybody? I encourage you, this is a pretty lengthy piece on key PM traits, but you need to make a personal assessment of yourself as you go through these project manager traits to kind of give yourself a scorecard. I don't think we expect everybody to be very good at all of these things. Some people are better at some things, other people are better at others, but these are things you should be looking at to really understand and assess yourself as a PM, and whether or not you need improvement in certain areas and where you can continue to get better. But the one I like to look at very much in this assessment of PM traits is the managing team conflicts. Conflict management is a big piece of project management. Undoubtedly, there's going to be situations come up that, in a project that result in conflict. And I would always tell you, build the trust of your team, be fair, and work through these conflicts, because in any conflict, somebody walks away unhappy generally. And you have to build rapport with people, give them the underlying reasons why you're holding a position, and be able to manage conflict. And that's it with the internal team. Managing conflict with your client is far more challenging, because you drop back to the general phrase that always gets used, the client is always right. You have to determine as a PM how far you want to take that, because the reality is sometimes a client may not be right. How are you going to take an angle and a position on that to manage the conflicts that come up in that area? So this is where we talk about, assess yourself, look at these traits and skill sets, and, truly make that self-assessment. Is project management right for me? And do I feel like I have a grasp on these? And again, you can't be perfect with all of them. You can be, give yourself a scorecard as you look through them, but there are things, as you go down the path of project management, you got to continue to get good at as you progress. So I see we're closing in on 10 to 12 here, and I think there's going to be a quick break. But just, the takeaways we want you to have from this session is, good project management is critical to our business. I mean, projects are the building block of our business. And as a PM, you have a critical role and responsibility. Again, you're also the face of LaBella. We look at you for successful projects while also building client relationships, developing repeat business, and doing the things that, you find rewarding. Project management is a very challenging position, but it can be very rewarding as well. When you do have successful clients, you develop a client list that likes to work with you, of repeat business. I mean, those are the rewards that you find in being a project manager. And not only from the outside, but you have a team that recognizes you as a leader and likes to work on your projects. Once you start getting that feel, you're making headway in project management. You certainly have a key role to play there. We understand that improvements in our project management are necessary. That will always be the case. So continuous improvement is what we want you to have as a takeaway from this. A unified approach is powerful. We do have resources and people that you can contact in situations where you can get advice and talk to people about how to handle situations. We have an intranet that gives many tools that will be talked about in subsequent sessions to help you, so that don't feel like you're on an island out there when you feel like you're at a standstill and you need help in certain areas. And again, good project management results in better client, employee, and financial experience in the firm, and that's ultimately what makes us successful. So with that, that's about all I have to say. Do we have any closing questions or even comments on what you heard today? Any feedback or anything anyone would like to say? I know I went very quick, but hopefully you have some learning from this, and we set the tone for your upcoming sessions where there'll be a deeper dive in many of these areas as we talked about the LaBella way of doing it. So
Mike,
there's not any questions.
We have a comment in the chat. Perhaps we will cover this in series, but how do we differentiate or clarify our internal PM responsibility, scope, schedule, cost from an external project management responsibility of the clients, which may include a much larger team and broader effort, particularly if the client's PM may have less experience?
Can you read that one more time, Heather?
Sure. How do we differentiate or clarify our internal PM responsibility, scope, schedule, cost from an external project management responsibility of the clients, which may include a much larger team and broader effort, particularly if the client's PM may have less experience?
So Mike, do you mind if I take that one?
Yeah, go ahead, Catherine.
Yeah, so I think some of this, so yes, some of that will be covered during the course of these trainings that we're doing. I will say that if you are in a situation where you have a client and it's a multidisciplinary project and the client has other consultants that are a part of the team, there are times when LaBella is essentially hired as the project manager for the entire project, in which case there should definitely be a separate phase just to manage the entire team. But I guess I'd be interested to know a little bit more about the specific circumstances that prompted that question. And if, as we go through the training, it doesn't become evident, you know, where that line is for, you can reach out to me directly and we could talk about it during one of the sessions.
Yeah, I think a little bit of what I'm hearing, I mean, one thing to emphasize here is, you know, on a project, whoever holds the prime agreement, as PMs, you have to remember there, you're responsible for all your sub-consultants. You need to have contracts in place with all those sub-consultants. And many times we get into, well, I gave them their piece of work. I just expected them to deliver it. That is not the right approach. Owners look at us from the standpoint, and clients look at us, and we take on some consultants. They're essentially LaBella. As they look at the entire team, we are responsible for their quality control. We're responsible for their scope, and making sure that they're delivering everything. And it may be very common that you'll get a sub-consultant coming back and asking for ad services. That's not uncommon whatsoever, and you have to know how to manage that. And again, you have to evaluate whether or not you can go to the owner for that, or how you're going to best navigate getting that consultant back and engaged. Because I can tell you, in my experience, we've had some consultants that say, you know, we're going to stop work until, you know, we get an extension of fee, we get this, we get that, and that can be a very challenging piece. I'm not sure that related 100% to the question, but I wanted to make another point as well, because managing sub-consultants can be a very challenging piece.
Are there any other questions? Comments? All right, we will take a break and we will be back at 12:05.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you all. Okay, we are back. So our next presenter is Beth Curran, who I mentioned before is our head of our marketing group, and she's going to educate us a bit on how clients buy. So Beth, take it away.
Thanks, Kat. Hi, everybody. Quite a few familiar faces. Thanks for joining us today. I have basically a presentation that'll take the last hour here that we have, but there's a couple opportunities where I'll ask you to either take a poll or throw out some questions. And if you have any questions throughout, feel free to raise your hand. I know Kat and Heather might help me if I miss them, and or throw something in the chat and we can get to it at the end. I'll try to leave a little bit of time. So I first like to start by having take a quick poll. So bear with me as I launch this first one, and the question is already on the screen. Have you ever taken a college level marketing class? I'll just give you just a couple minutes just to throw your answer in here. Almost there. 1 or 2 more seconds. Okay. Looks like we got about 80% in. So let me share the results with you guys. So hopefully, do you guys see these results? So the answer was 80% of you, more or less, had the answer that was no. And so why do I start this way? For a couple reasons. One is I want you to feel if you have a question that you should probably ask it, because 80% of you might also be in the same boat, right? And I also like to start off this way because I, for a really long time, was one of those 80%. So just a little quick background on me and why I'm the one presenting to you today, as my undergraduate degree is in design. I have a degree in environmental design. During that process of getting that degree, I had exactly one class that was called Professional Practice, in which we tried to go over marketing, contracts, specs, basically everything associated with running a design business. And many curriculums to this day don't have any marketing curriculum in there. It's kind of nuts. We could look to architecture as being probably one of the reasons why that is. So until the 1970s, the American Institute of Architects actually forbade all marketing activities by architects. So they weren't allowed to knowingly compete on price. They weren't allowed to advertise. And so really what you have is like an industry that never really embraced advertising. Like we saw, like, I don't know if you ever watched Mad Men, the 60s, people started really kind of figuring out what brand was, and there was television advertising, and there was all of this sort of new approaches to how you might choose to bring your business to market. And so what happened was these architecture firms, they kind of just they copied other firms, right? So they copied law firms. So that's why you tend to get a lot of legacy firms, or just like the last names of the principals, because they were following law firms. And the only way that they had to bring in work was just really to rely on word of mouth and their reputation, right? So that led to an industry that really the only marketing activities they were doing was trying to network. So that's why we have like sort of this long history of what some people would call the old boys club, where you're golfing, you're networking, you really want to kind of see and be seen in the right place. And this persisted for a really long time. And people that did it well were successful, and then they trained the people behind them to do it, and they trained the people behind them to do it. And so that's why as an industry, what we see in architecture, engineering, and construction, for a long time, this has been an industry that hasn't had the level of sophistication in marketing that other industries have had. I think this is nuts, and I think we can all agree, because number one way you can advance in an architecture or engineering or other consulting firm is to bring in clients, right? It's to bring in work. And that's really how a lot of people really advance their careers, is because they're successful in bringing in new clients, new projects, new opportunities. So, I throw this up there, I'm not a business development person. Business development is the equivalent of sales, right? So there's sales and marketing, they're not the same. But you don't have to be an amazing salesperson to help us bring in new work, right? And I'm going to talk today about marketing and sort of some of the stuff that we're doing. And we can't do it without you guys, right? So we need you engaged, we need you participating in this. And as project managers, you are the direct person in front of the customer. So you need to understand a little bit about how marketing works, right? I like to use this analogy, right? If your job as a PM is now to start to bring some worms back to the nest, right? You're going to have teams that you need to bring projects back to keep them fed. Marketing's job is to make it rain and make the worms come up, right? So they're easy to pick up and grab. So that's sort of in this analogy, the role that marketing is playing. But we need you to understand a little bit about kind of what we're trying to do here and some basic marketing strategies, right? So that's what we're going to try to do in 50 minutes today. Any questions so far? No? Okay. All right. So if you've never taken a marketing class, then what you know about marketing probably exists as being marketed to as a consumer, right? You are receiving marketing messages all the time from retailers, you name it, basically companies galore, right? And certainly with digital marketing and social media, the messages we're receiving are constant, and there are thousands of them every day. So what I like to do is kind of point out, we're not going to talk about marketing as a whole, right? We're going to talk about marketing a specific thing, which is professional services, which is the category that we're in. And it makes sense to do that, right? Because if I go to a marketing conference and they're talking about, how to put a sale and get you to buy a pack of gum, it's a very different scenario than when we're trying to get a client to buy, a multi-year engineering term contract, right? They're just not the same. So we actually have a professional group called SMPS. It's the Society of Marketing for Professional Services. And it includes architecture, engineering, construction, consulting firms. It includes accounting and financial firms, law firms, and other kinds of like consultants. And the reason why we sort of group all of us together is because our purchase looks kind of similar, right? So if you're hiring a law firm, or you're hiring an accounting firm, or you're hiring an engineer, there's a couple of things that our customer has in common. One is that these tend to be high risk purchases, right? So they include maybe a lot of money, or there's a lot of impact to sort of how that project or initiative the client is trying to undertake goes. The contract has high dollar value. There's probably more than one decision maker, right? When we talk about marketing to other businesses, when we sell to a business, a lot of times there's more than one decision maker. And ultimately, we're asking them to buy a product that they can't see, right? They cannot pick up the design or the engineering solution. We don't give them the solution before they hire us. It's not like you get to look at A, B, and C and pick B because you like it the best. They're hiring based on our expertise and sort of our past reputation of what we've been able to achieve. And in many cases, depending how educated your client is, your client may be evaluating professionals in an area they have no understanding of or experience of, right? Like if I try to hire a lawyer and I'm not a lawyer, right? So now I'm sort of lost in trying to figure out, how do I know who's a good lawyer? And that's what's happening for a lot of customers. So this specific type of marketing is we're trying to address those very specific client needs and some of those unique parameters around what these purchasing decisions look like. SMPS is an organization, most of the members of the marketing team belong to it. We do have a great conference that's actually this week coming up in Austin, Texas, and it's just filled with people who have jobs like mine, right? Where we're trying to help firms grow their clients, grow their business. We have a great magazine called Marketer. There's always different networking events for us kind of going on. And I mention it because, well, to be honest, 15 minutes today isn't going to be enough. So if this sort of piques your interest, we'd love to share some of our resources with you if you'd like to learn more. And two, as I want you to know, as I kind of go through these slides, there is going to be times where I'm telling you sort of my opinion and my experience in doing this type of marketing for 10 years. But a lot of this is research-based, and this organization provides us a lot of research that really helps us examine the science behind how people make decisions and what kind of marketing is effective. Marketing is half art, half science. It's increasingly becoming very metric-driven. So there is a lot of data that's available to help us make good decisions. Okay, next poll. I hope you're all still with me. I'm going to tell you about a time where I actually had to buy professional services. So when in 2017, we were trying to decide whether or not we needed to rebrand. And if you are new to the company, we actually did do a rebranding initiative in 2018 and to correspond with our 40th anniversary. And so I had to select a professional marketing consultant to help us execute this rebrand. And it was very similar to what happens with a lot of our clients in that nobody showed me what they were proposing we rebrand to. I had to pick them and then they would do the rebranding project. So I actually had to go through a process not dissimilar to what our clients go through, where we issued an RFP, we created a scope of services, and then I looked at a variety of consultants and I had to choose one. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about 3 choices that we had. The first firm, Firm A, was local. So we were initiating this project from Rochester, which is where I sit. And they did a study for us. We had done a study the previous year where we kind of looked at, could we just refresh our logo? Did we really need to go through a whole rebranding process? Was the tagline okay? Did we need to change it all, etc.? And they had sort of done a study for us where they had evaluated that and led us to the decision to do an entire rebrand project. Firm B was also local, and this was a marketing firm where I had a relationship with one of their project managers. It was pretty strong relationship. As I had been thinking about transitioning from design to marketing, he had been a mentor to me, and I'd met with him a bunch of times and talked with him about my career development and career pathing. And so I'd say I had a pretty strong relationship with him at this firm. And then Firm C was somebody who wasn't local. They're actually in Richmond, Virginia, and this was pre-Joyce. So hey, Richmond team. But I had never met them. And I, had no relationship with them whatsoever, except they had heard someone from their firm speak once at a conference. And this guy that they had was an AEC expert. He had been doing a lot of AEC marketing work and rebrand work, and was sort of becoming well known for, he was a former civil engineer, for kind of knowing our industry. So we're going to take another quick poll, and I want you to take a guess at which firm won the work. Five seconds. Give it your best guess. Maybe you already know. I don't think most people know the answer to this, but okay. I'm going to end the poll and share the results. You guys did a lot better, to be honest, than others have done. I don't know if you can see this clearly. But yeah, so the answer here is firm C. So 55% of you got it right. And usually when we've been doing this, I think it's been very rarely does the majority get firm C. There's usually a lot of firm Bs that come in. But yeah, the answer is firm C. And let's talk about probably why that was. It wasn't just that I wanted to go to Richmond, although I love coming to Richmond. It's because when we look at research across the board, we see that the future does favor the specialist, right? So some of this has to do with my age. So I was a decision maker on this project, and it was back in 2017, right? So I'm firmly a millennial. I'm an older millennial, but I'm a millennial. And generally speaking, younger decision makers we see don't mind bridging distance with technology. So they're a lot more comfortable saying, yeah, okay, well, we'll just, Teams it or whatever. And this was pre-COVID. And, nowadays, I'm not sure this is quite as true, because I think a lot of people have become more comfortable with bridging distance with technology. But we also see that Gen X and millennials tend to be less relationship driven, that by and large, even though they may like and respect and know you socially, that they tend to be more interested in working with somebody that really presents a lot of expertise in the area that they're looking for. The other thing to know about this firm, Circle S, so this is Tim Asmos, right? So he's the guy I had heard speak. He used to come from a civil engineering firm. He does a lot of content on marketing AEC firms. And he had just shown up everywhere that I was, right? So do you remember this slide from just like a couple slides ago, where I told you where people like me read and what conferences we go to and who organizes our networking events? Everything on this slide is actually Tim. This is Tim at a networking event. This is Tim with an article in our magazine. This is Tim at Build Business, right? So very clearly, he knows how to help people with my job. And so he shows up where people with my job are, right? Does anyone know what we call it? This is a question quiz. Shout it out if you want. Type it in the chat if you want. When this happens, when I just called Tim, he had never met me, but I called him. Anyone? Okay, I'm just going to tell you.
Cold call.
It's called. What was that? Did I hear one?
Cold call.
It's a reverse cold call, right? Because cold call would be if Tim called me and I had
Ah.
never met him and he was selling me something. That's a great point, right? It's the opposite of a cold call. We call it inbound marketing, right? And that's when the customer comes to you, right? Instead of you going out to the customer, isn't it a lot easier if the clients just showed up at our doorstep and said, can you help me with this? Which is exactly what happened with Tim, right? So that's inbound marketing in a nutshell, which is that Tim built trust with me before he ever met me, because I had seen his content, I had seen his thought process, I knew what expertise he had, and I could see that he was trustworthy and reliable and an expert in this area, right? That's called inbound marketing. All the things he didn't do, exactly what we just heard, right? He didn't cold call me. He didn't get a list of directors of marketing and AEC firms and start calling me. He didn't e-blast me, never sent me a mailer. He never met me in an event. He never gave me a brochure. He never set up a trade show booth, and he never gave me any free stuff. And he still won my business, a pretty significant piece of business. It was not an insignificant contract. So when we talk about marketing, we're really talking about two different kinds, right? Inbound marketing and traditional outbound marketing. And neither one is right or wrong. A lot of times outbound marketing works. If you're a pizzeria, you're probably doing a lot of outbound marketing and it probably makes a ton of sense. What it is in our industry, we really want to be doing both. But what we find is that inbound marketing is really, really effective because we're talking about high trust, high value decisions. Any questions so far? No? Okay, I'm going to press on. So here's what we know about how clients make decisions. This is the name of the presentation, How Clients Buy. There's actually 4 phases: learning, vetting, discussing, and hiring, right? And what happens is in AEC firms is most firms spend most of their time and money in the discussing phase because that's where the RFP is. And it makes sense on some level because RFPs are where there's real projects, right? They're usually funded. There's an actual opportunity. Somebody's going to make a decision. It's close to the money, right? So that's why if you're in a firm that, you know, has a more, I'm going to say less advanced marketing program, they're probably mostly just answering RFPs. That's what marketing looked like for a really long time in a lot of AEC firms. The problem with this approach is this is where our clients spend their time. They spend a vastly greater amount of time in the first 2 phases, learning and vetting, right? 50% of the C-suite reads industry information at least an hour a week. Younger decision makers are evaluating recommendations they receive online before they ever even call you. They're doing a lot of learning and vetting before they're issuing that RFP. And most people that have been in business development for a long time will tell you this is nothing new. We've always known that if we're in front of the client, we're engaged with the client before the RFP comes out, we're much more likely to win. But really what you're learning is that you can really lose the project if we're not in front of them in those earlier phases, right? So a lot of people ask me, okay, what does learning and vetting look like? What are they doing during those phases, right? Here's some examples of what they're doing. And learning, there's usually some impetus for why they think they need a consultant. It could be their competitor just got a shiny new feature and they're worried that they need one too. Maybe if I know there's a lot of waste people on here, maybe there's a new regulation coming and they're trying to figure out, right, like what are we going to do about this forthcoming regulation? You know, maybe it could be anything. Maybe there's funding coming and how are we going to use it? But there's something that's happening that they feel like they need to address. And so they start researching, right? They start learning about what they need to do. That looks like trade publications, you know, getting on LinkedIn. Maybe they'll watch a webinar on something because they're trying to figure out how this is going to impact them. They might join their relevant LinkedIn group, start doing some online research, right? And then during vetting, they're starting to look for people that can help them, right? So now they're maybe looking for recommendations from other people. They could be willing to take an introductory meeting with a service provider. They could go to a trade show and actually interact with some of the vendors that are there. But they're trying to get a sense for who might be able to help me with this issue, right? So what happens is when we look at all these sort of different ways these activities that they undertake during these phases, there are some activities that are generational, right? In terms of some generations really like doing some of them first, and then the other generations like doing them, you know, they're preferred. It's not to say that only boomers do this and only millennials do this, but it's what feels easiest to them. What are they most likely to do first? And so you can see there's some color coding up there, right? And we know that the younger generations really love to Google, they love to get online, they love to get on social and get some answers there. So already we were seeing some generational shift in terms of where people were going to for information. And then COVID happened, right? And COVID took all of these off the board, right? So what happened is we saw an acceleration of some of the shift that was sort of already occurring in the marketplace in terms of where people were going first or how they were making their decisions. And COVID just put some gasoline on it and made it so that some of the in-person stuff really became non-viable or were replaced with some more digital outreach type tools and methods. Anyone have any questions? I don't see any nodding, but I also don't see any blank stares. So it seems I'm gonna press on. Okay, so in order to do inbound marketing, the key component to this is who are you trying to talk to, right? And this is sort of key to any aspect of marketing. And I guarantee you the answer is not everybody. Can't be everything to everybody all at once. It's impossible. So when we look at how we're going to do marketing, the first thing we think about is, you know, who are we trying to attract and where do they learn, right? Just like I told you where I go and learn all the things that are impacting our industry, we have to kind of do the same thing for our client types. And so this is a great piece of content we developed on this new wastewater treatment plant we did in Charlotte that had some really cool new wastewater treatment technology in. I could have placed this article in the Charlotte Business Journal and I would have reached more people, right? More potential customers. But I would not have necessarily reached more people with wastewater treatment plants, right? So instead, what we did is we put this piece of content in Water World magazine, and we also got it in Water and Waste Digests, etc. And what we said is, you know, who's going to be interested in this and who's our audience, right? Where can we reach them where they're learning about the things impacting their day-to-day? So the big thing to kind of take away from this here is, of course, you know, this wastewater treatment content did not help our K-12 team, right? So if you can't rely on other people in the company to make content for your market, if you're the market leader, then you need to be making content because somebody else can't do it, right? It needs your insight to your market. And then the other thing is just to always keep in mind, we're not a consumer brand, right? I can't sell LaBella like I would sell M&Ms. No one's ever going to, you know, you go get your hair cut and someone's heard of us, you know, like we're not a consumer brand. We can't be in front of everybody. We don't have the resources. So we have to be really specific about who it is we're trying to reach. You guys might recognize this. This is another piece of content we did, a piece that we wrote with Jenny about some of the trends impacting the waste industry. What I like to kind of call out about this is it's actually not about a project at all. So you don't have to wait until you have some marquee project that's really innovative and cool to do content marketing. In this, Jenny's writing about, you know, women and waste and how that's a challenge. And she's offering her insight on the industry just because she's an expert in the industry. What she's saying is, I've worked in waste so long, my perspective has value. So again, don't think you have to wait until you have a project that feels particularly exciting. You have insights based on the fact that you're an expert in the area in which you work, and you can comment on things and have discussion and dialogue with people during the learning and vetting phases without having some project that, you know, is going to make the national ENR magazine. Let's talk about expertise versus experience. I never try to read slides, except I always read this one, right? So experience is what you've done, right? And that's documented through case studies, project write-ups. These are all the places we've done this work. And it's very valuable, and it provides reassurance later in the buying process, in the discussion phase, that you can actually do what you say you could do, right? So it's very important. But expertise is what you know how to do, right? So that's like the piece that Jenny had, right? That's just her expertise in terms of what I see in the industry, what's going on. It allows you to have meaningful and interesting conversations early in the prospect's buying process, right? So they're both really important, but experience is documented and expertise is demonstrated, right? So expertise is showing instead of telling. So I always use this K-12 example, right? You can tell people that you've done $150 million in K-12 schools, or you can show them by writing an article about what the top 5 trends are in new classroom design, right? That's how you show them that you actually have all that experience and it means something, that it matters. Anyone have any questions on this? No? Okay. So we're always wanting PMs to help us by writing to show expertise, right? So you're going to find will be times that you're a PM, we're going to come to you, we're going to say document that project and what we did, and we're going to write it up. And you guys are probably used to that, and that won't be a big ask. But what we are going to ask you to do is to also help us write to show expertise. So as you start gaining experience in your specific market, we're going to want you to write to show us that expertise. And that's not technical writing, right? It shouldn't sound like a cover letter or a report. It sounds like a person, not a company, right? And it's not about us. You don't talk about yourself, you talk about the industry, you talk about the topic at hand versus trying to sell LaBella. So there'll be times when we ask you guys, is there a topic, is there a trend where we could put together some kind of content marketing on? Because we want to do some inbound attraction for people that have that issue or that topic or that problem. And that's going to be something that as a PM, we're going to ask you to do. Question: does anyone know when inbound marketing doesn't work? Like, hopefully you're with me and you're like, okay, this kind of makes sense. Do you know what would make this not work? Anyone? Anyone? Oh, is there something in the chat? No. Someone's got to take a guess. No?
Not responding to calls that come in.
Sure. Yeah, that's a great example, right? If somebody is like reaching out and then nobody can bother to get back to them, that's a terrible thing. Yeah, no, that's a risk too. I'll tell you, that wasn't what I was thinking of, but it's a fair answer. The one I was thinking of, or when inbound marketing doesn't work, is when it's too promotional, right? So it's not really content that's interesting. It's a sales pitch. Maybe you guys have encountered that before when you like click on a white paper or something and it turns out it's all about something, just somebody trying to sell you something. And then the other way it doesn't work is if nobody sees it, right? Do you remember how we were talking about how there's all these marketing messages coming at us all the time? I mean, you could write a beautiful article about, a project that you've done or why it's relevant and what's going on. But if nobody reads it, then no one's going to call you about it, right? So there's a couple different ways that we can make sure that that doesn't happen, right? Is that one is we're going to make sure that the article isn't promotional. And that's usually not a problem for us at LaBella because generally speaking, we're not making you write 5 articles a month. So you're like grasping at straws at what it should be. But we make sure somebody can see it, right? And so a couple different ways that we do that is we try to make sure our content is coming with sort of a pre-endorsement of somebody, a trusted group. So that means, making it appear in a trade journal or industry magazine, someone that has sort of credentials that people kind of trust. We also tend to pay more attention to content when it comes from someone we know. And that's why we're always talking about the importance of LinkedIn. You can share it on LinkedIn and you're seeing it from somebody you know, a real person, that really, really increases the likelihood that someone's going to take the time to read your piece. Other ways we can do is we can, combine inbound pieces with outbound strategies. We can make sure that, we can do paid advertising to try to get people to engage with our content. And then there are times when, you can take somebody that is sort of a trusted voice. We've done this in the K-12 team a little bit with a kind of trusted school expert, Dr. Robert Dillon, and we kind of pair up with them. And then we say, okay, well, let's work on a piece of content together. That's pretty rare. But that's influencer marketing in a nutshell. If you're on social media and you see somebody sharing something and they have a built-in audience, that's influencer marketing. So assuming that we have a great piece of content, we have lots of tools in our toolbox to make sure somebody sees it. All right. Now let's talk about how they actually decide. Let's go into the discussion phase, right? So we're in here, we're evaluating providers. What does that look like? Well, whenever we make kind of critical decisions about buying things, we tend to, as human beings, psychologically, sort our decision-making into points of parity and points of differentiation. So let's pretend we're buying a new car, right? So maybe you're looking at a couple different models. Points of parity are the things that you must have, right? So maybe we decide we must have 4-wheel drive, we must have a sunroof, we must be able to fit 5 in the car. Those are your points of parity, and providers or cars that don't meet those will be out of your selection set. That's how psychologically we tend to make decisions. Once we have a group in our selection set that satisfies our points of parity, we look for points of differentiation, right? So maybe we say, well, we really like the upholstery in the Toyota, but we really like the cup holders in the Honda, right? And then we start maybe figuring out how are they different, right? So we start with Are they the same enough that they meet my needs? And then we look at, are they different? So this is the problem when it comes to evaluating AEC firms. Everybody says the same stuff. It's really, really hard to find meaningful differentiation, especially if you're a buyer that doesn't really understand the industry. Now, some of our clients are quite sophisticated, but not all of them are. And that makes it even harder for them to figure out what makes the firms different. And everybody really says the same thing. Our people are great. We're like family. We are a leader in this. Here's a list of our services. Here's a list of our people. Here's a list of our projects. Every proposal in a nutshell, right? And it's tricky, right? Because everybody in our industry is qualified, right? We have to provide licensed professionals. We all have insurance. If we were really screwing projects up left and right, we quickly go out of business, right? Because these are high stakes projects. So chances are most of the people that they've got it narrowed down to are qualified. And then it gets really, really hard. It's really hard for the client to figure out who they should choose. I did this example when we rebranded, and I won't read them all to you, but I took copy from like 3 of our competitors' website and I took their names out. And then I put it in front of our leadership team and I asked them to tell me which one was us. And they couldn't tell, right? Because everybody says the same thing, right? If you read this, founded in 19 blah with a staff of over blah, we proudly serve our clients, partnering with them to achieve their goals. We have the resources needed to manage all aspects of your project. You know, and then you can see the same thing right in second paragraph from firm B. Blah, blah, blah is committed to providing the best resources available to our clients. Our team of professionals provides the experience and knowledge necessary, blah, da, 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 right? So it's hard. It's hard to stand out. I have a whole nother slide of this, but I'll skip it. So if everyone's qualified, how do you differentiate, right? There's really only 4 ways to do it. You have to understand your client's problems better than anyone else, or you have to come up with better solutions than anyone else, or you have to communicate the benefits of your solutions better. Like maybe your solutions are the same, but you talk about it better, or you have to provide stronger proof that your solutions will really solve their problems. The tricky thing about this is you can't do any of those 4 things easily if all you know about the project is what's in the RFP, right? Because I guarantee you, because then everybody has the same insight into what their problem is and what the potential solutions are. The really way that you can differentiate is you've got to be talking to the client in a way before the RFP comes out, so you know more about what's going on with them and what their issues are than the other people. That's why it's so important to be in front of them during learning and vetting. You also really can't do this with just boilerplate proposal content. You've got, you know, a standard project approach. You're not going to be able to stand out from everybody else because everybody else has a standard project approach too. Does that make sense? Yeah, okay. Here's your last quiz. How much does the average proposal cost the firm? And I am going to give you 4 choices. Take a guess. Five more seconds. Okay, here it comes. So yeah, 48% of you guessed $10,000. And that's what our research shows too, right? So $10,000 is the average cost for a proposal. Now that's average, right? So some proposals we know are more in depth to answering them than others. Some of them we get an interview, and now we're adding all this time preparing for an interview, right? So that's an average across the board. But so the thing is like, it does cost a lot of money, right? So of course, we've all been in situations, or maybe not all of us, but we've all heard of situations where we proposed on something, we thought we didn't have a chance in hell of getting it, and we did. And that felt really good, right? But it's just like winning roulette, right? It's possible, of course it happens, but it's not good business strategy, right? And it's not fiscally responsible if we really think about the resources that we have and how much money and energy and effort goes into preparing a response to a proposal. So we like to take the philosophy, of course, if you chase two rabbits, you'll catch neither. And the thing to keep in mind is, of course, if we're spending time on a low chance proposal, it takes time away from a high chance proposal. So we want to be really strategic. And I think this came up when Mike was presenting, right? You guys asked about the no-go process. We want to use that. You want to reference the client history in CRM. You want to use the CRM so you can kind of see, have we lost the last 5 to this client? And then also you want to listen to your marketing team member because they'll have the best sense of how much effort will be required to prepare the proposal, how they think we might show. They have a lot of, competitor intelligence from just the fact this is what we do all day. So keep that in mind. A lot of times we get asked the question, is it wired? You ever hear the phrase, it's wired for so-and-so? That basically means, does the client already know who they want to pick and they're just RFPing because they were required to by law? And the answer is, yeah, probably, because like I just said, they have spent all this time in learning and vetting. They probably have in their mind a front runner. The few times I've hired professional services companies for the rebrand, for a website consultant, before I issued my RFP, I already had somewhat of a sense of who I thought I was going to choose. When we say it's wired, that means realistically, like they really already know who they're going to choose. That can have some political considerations, depending on what market you work in. But that's why it's so important that we take a whole marketing process serious and not just the RFP. Okay, so let's talk quickly about once we submit the proposals. If you're a person and you've been handed 15 spiral bound books and told to read them all and pick a consultant, what would you do? I'll tell you what I would do. I'd go through and look to see who forgot the required form so I could throw them out, right? So I'd have fewer to read. And that's what our clients do too. If I'm going to be totally honest with you, the first pass through the proposal pile is always to DQ so that they don't have to read them all. So therefore, when we prepare a response to an RFP, we follow the RFP to the letter in terms of requirements. If there are page limits, follow them. If they're asking for certain materials in a certain order, put them in order. Add tabs so they can find them, right? You want to make sure that they have no reason to DQ and that if they're going through and looking for certain elements, they can find them. I tell you, we do post-proposal debriefs, and we have encountered a client that said, oh, we didn't choose yours because you didn't provide X. And we did provide X, just they skimmed it, right? So there's a lot of stuff that goes into how we lay out the proposal that's really not up for debate. Because a lot of people do want to debate it, and trust us when we say we have a lot of lessons learned to draw on here, and that our proposal templates are designed the way they are for very strategic reasons. This is the best way that we found to write a proposal, is just to remember, they don't want to read a lot of fluff, right? We want to show that we value their time. We want to speak in their language, avoid jargon wherever we can. We don't need to regurgitate the RFP. Chances are the reviewer may have helped write the RFP. We want to use concise language, right? Have you ever heard the quote, I would have written a shorter letter, but I didn't have time? It takes time to write stuff really clearly and concisely. It takes editing. But the more we do it, the more powerful our words are. And the more we personalize the proposal to the prospect by talking in their language about their issues and their industry terms, the more it resonates. Of course, like I've just discussed, not every client reads every part of the proposal. In fact, most don't. They're going to skim. So we want to use pull quotes to emphasize key messages. And we also use captions a lot in our proposal templates because a lot of times they're wanting to just kind of go through and they'll read the captions and the pull quotes. So those are opportunities to really hone in on key messages. And again, these are all built into the templates. So you just have to listen to your marketing team member and we'll help guide you through them. Just keep this in mind. There's no grand finale, right? When it comes to someone reading a proposal, you want to make your case right up front. That cover letter is probably the most important part of the proposal, where you're going to really try to summarize why it should be us to take on that project. Don't save the good stuff for the end. Chances are they won't get through to it. Ultimately, clients make decisions when it comes to choosing a consultant based on risk, right? When I was picking a rebranding consultant, if I chose wrong, I was going to have to live. There was a lot on the line. I was managing this project for the firm. The end resulting logo we were going to have to live with for a long time. I had to show it to everybody in the company, right? There was a lot of risk there. So ultimately, clients are trying to figure out, what are the risks to their project? What does this look like if it goes wrong? And what are the risks to hiring us, right? And which consultant feels like the safest choice, the one most likely to solve my issue with the least amount of things going wrong, right? So a lot of that might kind of touch on your role as the PM is to manage risks, but that's what your client is trying to do too, because they're the PM on their side, right? So think about how you can present us as being the least risky choice. And that really can resonate. In order to help reduce the sense of risk, testimonials go a long way. It's sort of like when you go to buy something online and you see a bunch of positive reviews, it makes you feel more confident, right, about putting that in your cart. Same thing for us. Client testimonials are really, really important. But ultimately, what you're looking to convey in a proposal is expertise, empathy, right? We understand your pain. We understand what your problem is. We understand what you're trying to do. Authenticity, we got to be who we really are, right? We don't want to pretend to be a firm that we're not. And then passion, you have to want the work. We can't pretend like, oh my God, we're so busy. If we win this, I don't even know how we're going to do it, right? That would not be a very good marketing message. We want to show that we're passionate about their work and their project and their business. This is the key to interviews too. We don't really have time in this session to talk about interviews a ton. Could probably have a whole training session just on interviews. But realistically, this is what we're trying to convey in an interview: expertise, empathy, authenticity, and passion. The only way to tell if this is coming across in your actual live in-person presentation is to practice. You have to rehearse with a real audience and then incorporate their feedback. If you're coming off inauthentic because you're nervous about presenting and it feels like you're not really confident in what you're saying, the only way you're going to get that feedback is to have someone that you trust give it to you. So you've got to practice. And I think too, it's awkward to practice in front of our colleagues. But I always say, there's like 5 people on a basketball team. There's usually 5 people on an interview team. You can't expect to have 5 people go in a room and make magic without practicing. You wouldn't expect a basketball team to do it, and you can't expect an interview team to do it either. Sometimes we get this question a lot, and we're almost through my slides, guys. So if you have any questions, we can jump into them in just a couple more slides. What do we do in the interview if they don't tell us what they want to hear, right? Or that someone's like, oh, you got 35, 45 minutes to come in and give a presentation. Well, what should that presentation look like? Here's what we recommend. If the interview has no prescribed structure, we follow issues, features, benefits, and proof. And again, I'm sorry, I'm going to use a K-12 example because I think the first time we presented this, it was to K-12. But we can go through another example too if you want. So issues are, what is their essential challenge or problem? For a K-12 project, it might be the project must be complete before school starts. That's their hottest button. It's the most critical kind of success marker. Then you talk about features. What do we have to solve that problem? Well, we have manpower, we have relationships with the state education department, and we have in-house environmental. Then benefits, why do those features matter? Well, we're not going to be just delayed when we discover asbestos because we have in-house environmental. We'll create a project schedule that is realistic based on what we know the state education department review time will be. And that schedule might shorten design time, but that'll be okay because we won't lose quality because we're so big that we have enough people, right? So we tie those features into benefits to their project. And then you provide proof, evidence of our claims. Here's a similar project we completed in a shorter time frame, right? That's how you kind of build our features into a way that really resonates with them. I have a lot of people that go in no matter what the project is, and they want to talk about how LaBella is full service. But if us being full service doesn't tie into a benefit, if it doesn't address their hot button issues, it's not a feature or a benefit that that client cares about, right? So that's why there's no one feature or benefit that we hit all the time when we're marketing. We have to know who's on the other side of the table and what their concerns are. And if anyone's wondering why Harry Potter is on this slide, the answer is this is the same structure you'd follow if you were storytelling. That's fundamentally what we're doing a lot of times in marketing is we're storytelling. Harry's our hero's journey, right? The hero of this is the client, and we're trying to show them how we're going to help them navigate their journey. These are called win themes. When you take, an issue and you figure out how you're going to address it, and usually you'll have 1 to 3 of these, and you can sprinkle them throughout the proposal and through an interview structure. And again, marketing could help you come up with these, but this again illustrates the importance of knowing what are their hot buttons. I think this is my last slide, guys. So what happens? We do all this, we do everything right, and we lose, right? Happens a lot. Probably happens on average 60% of the time we lose, just FYI. Well, we're going to get a debrief. We'll do a debrief survey to the client to see if we can get them to rate us. But we also may do one in person where we try to get some in-person feedback. And that's usually best done by a third party. A member of the marketing team is usually helpful to do that because it's easier to give feedback not to someone's face where it feels like a little bit less direct if it's us. If you know where we fell on feed, that's super helpful. Like maybe you heard, oh, we were 3rd highest, we were 4th highest, we were lowest, we were whatever. Put it in CRM because that helps other people. It helps other PMs know how to feed. It helps us the next time we go after it. Don't just keep it in your brain. Please, please, please share it. That's part of us leveraging our skill to help ourselves. And then a lot of times we get the question, can you turn a no into an opening for other opportunities? And the answer is maybe if you were a close second. But we don't want to just be preparing proposals just for the opportunity to debrief and get in front of the client. It's too expensive and labor intensive for that to be a viable BD strategy. And if you weren't a close second, you kind of just started off on the wrong foot, right? If your proposal wasn't that great because we didn't know that much about the client, now they may have a negative opinion of you when before they had a neutral one. So we don't want to encourage that as a general practice. And that's it. That's where I kind of end in terms of what is the psychology between how clients choose a consultant. I think in your next session, Brittany and Chris are going to talk about how we build relationships with our clients and realistically how, okay, you want a project, here's how we get going, the sort of how to put this stuff in Deltek, how to use CRM, all that sort of how-to stuff is coming. This is really just mostly meant to be an overview of some of the strategies behind this process. So I'd love any questions if you have any. I don't know if any came through in the chat. I don't know where my chat went. Any questions I can answer for anyone? I know it's almost 1 o'clock. Okay, well, if you think of any later, or you want to talk about some specific examples, because every market's a little different in terms of how we approach proposals and some of the procurement philosophy. I'm happy to talk through with you guys anything specific. Oh, here's a question. Is there a marketing specialist as part of every project team, or is there a central group that services a whole division company-wide? We have a new marketing team structure, which is sort of a hybrid of the two. We do have a centralized marketing team, and then they're divided up into sub-teams based on the disciplines and markets within the company. So yes, you should have somebody that is experienced and knowledgeable about the market you're in. And I don't know which market that question came from, but if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them specifically, or you can take a peek on the intranet and you can kind of see there's some guidance about kind of what marketer assists what part of the company.
Thank you, Beth. That was great. And there's a couple of themes about a number of different items that Beth touched on that you'll notice moving forwards will be coming and becoming recurring. One of which is going after good clients, good projects, understanding our clients' needs. Beth mentioned hot buttons. You know, one of the most important things is understanding right up front what a client's hot button is. And sometimes you have to, they don't even realize what their hot button is until you do a little bit of education with them. And quality, you know, quality assurance, quality control, making sure we're scheduling that into the very beginning of the project, from the cold call from the client or the non-cold call from the client, and making sure that we've got that embodied all the way through the process. So for our next session, which Beth mentioned is Chris Appel and Brittany McPhee, that I spoke to Chris, and there's a couple of resources that we're going to have you take a look at prior to our next session to kind of give you a little bit of head start, and we think it'll help you get a little bit more out of the session next time. So I'm going to share my screen so you can see where the resources are. Can you all see my screen all right? Yes, nodding heads. Okay, so this is the LaBella Today. If for those of you who don't know, LaBella Today is the primary means by which I would say the company communicates with staff. So if you don't go on here every day, I highly suggest that you do that. So prior to our class session next week, we're going to be going to Marketing CRM Central. This is an awesome page that marketing has put together with all of the information on our CRM program, which is part of Deltec, which houses our information on our clients and our opportunities. So there's a couple of things that we talked about that we're going to be talking about. We'd like you to take a look at in advance. One of which is there's a training on CRM here. There's a deep dive on opportunities and go no goes. So somebody you asked a question about the go no goes, and here's a deep dive on go no go. And then lastly, the CRM, marketing has a really great manual. And if you want, you can kind of click through it here, or you can download it. But I just wanted to bring these materials to attention. You know, please make every attempt to look at them prior to next session, because I think it'll help you get a lot out of it. There's a lot of information in this PM training, so we're trying to make sure that you have enough information in advance so you get the most of it as you can. So with that, unless anybody has any other additional questions, thank you very much to Beth and to Mike for today's session, and for all of you who are participating, and we look forward to seeing you next time. All right, thank you all. Have a great rest.